Please introduce yourself and briefly summarize your education and professional background.
My name is Emma Farmer. I'm the Ecosystems Manager here at the Dawes Arboretum. I work within the 1,600 acres of the Arboretum's natural areas, largely with a focus in the conservation of woodlands, wetlands, prairies, and riparian zones. Prior to Dawes, I obtained an Associates of Science in Natural Resource Management at Hawking College. After college, I did spend 2 seasons here at Dawes in a seasonal capacity, and then an opportunity opened for a full-time role in 2020, and that's kind of where I came from in that regard.
Okay, thanks. That's the background. So let's start with the Dawes Arboretum. What is it? What does it do? And what does it hope to do?
That's a really great question. For me, as someone that's grown up very local to Dawes, it's been forefront of my life from my childhood. So it's interesting to get to explain it to people that maybe don't have the background that I do. So Dawes is a living museum, which kind of sounds a little bit confusing, but in the same way that you can look at history in a traditional museum, Dawes has a lot of really great history, but the thing with our history is a lot of our history is alive. The trees and ecosystems that you see here at Dawes tell a story. We highlight plants and ecosystems from all over the world, not only for viewing pleasure, but as a way to genetic bank or provide genetic preserves and safeguard sensitive species and sensitive ecosystems. So we strive every day to grow curiosity into caring for the world that we share. Our founders, Beeman and Bertie Dawes, they founded Dawes in 1929, and they were very passionate about connecting people to the world around them. So even today, that can still be seen in our mission, which is enriching lives through the conservation of trees, nature, and history.
Okay, and just so that everyone watching and listening can be on the same page, where exactly is the Dawes Arboretum? Why was this kind of a goal and a place for this kind of living museum? And also, what is your role there?
So the Arboretum is located in Newark, Ohio, which is Lincoln County. So we're pretty central, about 45 minutes from Columbus. So our founders, Beeman and Bertie Dawes, had a few different homes, but they really came to Dawes and purchased this property as a way to immerse themselves in nature. And that's still our intent today, is to get people here and to help them connect with nature and to learn about nature. Um, my position specifically as the ecosystems manager, I'm in charge of most of the restoration projects that we do. So we recently have obviously installed the Rolling Hills Meadow wetland and then another wetland at our Red Barn Reserve. So I've been the lead on those projects as well as for the implementation as well as for the follow-up management. I do a lot of invasive species control to maintain high quality biodiverse ecosystems. And I also lead the charge for a lot of our land conservation based volunteers that we have at the Arboretum to help people grow passion for the world around them.
Okay, and that was a nice lead into the main topic of our discussion, which is that Rolling Hills Meadow property, which required some ecological restoration. Why did it need such restoration?
That's a really great question. So Rolling Hills Meadow was purchased by Dawes in 2014. It was actually the last piece of property that we've ever purchased. So 2014, we purchased it and it was in agriculture up until that point. So historically, it was being used as row crop agriculture. But we at Dawes, we have about 500 acres of agriculture actively each year. We have it enrolled in CAUV, Conservation Agricultural Use Value Program. So part of that is we do assessments of the properties each year. So we go out and look at them and say, how's the health of the soil? Are the crops doing well? Is this land productive, or are we seeing erosion and siltation and things like that? So when we went out in 2020 and did this assessment at the Rolling Hills property, we noticed a large amount of erosion and siltation. And we were seeing year after year crop failure, meaning the farmer planted the crops, but due to the amount of water or drought that it was seeing, those crops were not successful. So based off of those things, we did an in-depth soil sampling method to kind of see the structure of the soil, whether we had dry soil or hydric soil. And when we did that test, we found that a large majority of that property was hydric soil, meaning it likes to be wet. On top of that, we also noticed a large amount of, it's called a hard pan or a till line. It's basically severe soil compaction. So from years of agricultural use, especially on that hydric soil, it was creating this layer of basically impenetrable soil, which was limiting the root growth of the crops, leading to crop failure. So based off of that, we decided that it was a candidate to remove from agricultural practices so that we could try and do some soil regeneration through native plantings.
Okay, can you tell me in as much detail as possible and geared towards our engineering audience, some of the things that you did, like in details, what did you do to the soil to try and renovate it? What were some difficulties that you came across, and how were some of those difficulties overcome?
This site was really interesting for us. Here at Dawes, we're actually located at a very unique location when it comes to the glacier that came through Ohio. So part of our property is glaciated and part of it is non-glaciated. And Rolling Hills Meadow is right on the line of it. So actually a portion of it, the portion that was hydric soil, was part of the glaciated area. But we actually did have an upland area as well, part of the non-glaciated section. So we had to really work with the topography of that plot to be able to plant native plants that liked it there, essentially. So putting likes with the plants that like high and dry, well-drained soil, we designed a really cool mix to capitalize on that, and the same with the wet area. So again, with that topography, we were seeing a lot of flooding and droughting. Just the way that the land flows, that area was seeing a lot of water. So we basically had to design this restoration mix in a way that accounted for drought and flood. So that was really interesting. But largely for us, what we look at doing is planting native plants. And in this plot specifically, planting native prairies. So prairies in Ohio are vastly in decline. We have lost over 90% of native prairies in Ohio. So here at Dawes, that's something that we really try and provide that ecological niche for the grassland nesting birds, for pollinators. So that's what we initially had decided to do at Rolling Hills, because number one, it was going to provide bank stabilization. So native plants, especially native prairie plants, have really, really in-depth root systems, meaning the root systems can go down 6 feet. Whereas if you look at, say, a turf grass, their root system is maybe 6 inches, and that's probably on the high end. So looking at stabilizing the bank as well as putting in plants that could adapt with climate and climate change, knowing that we're going to see more volatile flooding and then drought in the later seasons, providing plants that can weather that was really big for us as well.
I'm curious, as we're talking, what is a native prairie like? What I know that there's probably different ones, but what does an Ohio native prairie actually look like? What composes that?
Prairie in Ohio, it was largely found in the north. So, I mean, we may have some scattered remnant prairies within Licking County, but largely it was found further north. But basically what distinguishes a prairie is the combination of forbs and grasses. So forbs are like your flowering perennials. Purple coneflower is a really great example. And then that grass ratio. So it's basically flowers and grasses with the absence of trees.
Okay, and you also talked a bit about how we were doing this project. Can you tell me who we are? Was this mostly an in-house project, or are you working with other people who were, brought in other areas of expertise?
This project it's probably my favorite. At Dawes, typically we will do in-house a form of restoration per year, whether that's installing an acre of woodlands or restoring a prairie or installing a wetland, whatever that may be. We typically take an area of degraded land and convert it on an annual basis. So the initial phase of Rolling Hills, which was the conversion from agriculture to prairie, that was fully done in-house by our staff. It was about 13 acres that we converted over the span of 2 years. And that was the largest prairie restoration that we've done in-house. which was super duper exciting. Our staff, I know, really love it, and it turned out really wonderfully. So after we installed the prairie, we continued to monitor it, kind of checked out what came up within the prairie, and we were still noticing a lot of water running through it. There was some old agricultural drain tiles in there that were busting, and they were causing these big eroded like washouts within the site. So that's when we kind of stepped back and are like, okay, what else can we do here? So then in 2023, we began plans for installing a wetland complex. So again, to capitalize on that hydric soil and understanding the topography and the way that the water moves through this site, we decided that a wetland would be a great way to capture that water, allow it to filter before it gets into the rest of the stream systems on site. For me personally, I had not done any wetland restorations prior to this, like I guess the ground moving portion of it. We had been managing wetlands that were on site since we had another one installed in 2006. But this was my first time actually being a part of the ground movement. So we partnered with 3 really great organizations, Microsoft and SER, which is Society of Ecological Restoration, as well as Stream and Wetlands Foundation out of Lancaster, Ohio. So getting to work with them was so impactful for my personal growth and professional growth, just to get to see how they're able to basically rebuild the structure of the soil and make a pool out of something that, as historic as I think my records went back to at least 1998, was being used as agriculture. For them to be able to look at that and then design it into a wetland that's now flourishing, and it's providing so many resources to wildlife. The birds and the waterfowl are so happy. We're getting some rare birds out here. And so that part of it's been really amazing. And we definitely couldn't have done it without the partnerships, because we just combined knowledge with them having the expertise in the creation of wetlands, and then our side of the prairies as stabilization, and then having SER giving us standards of how to do it, how to monitor it, how to keep up with it. It was just a really great culmination of everyone's knowledge coming to make a really amazing project.
Okay, so there are a lot of people who do the similar types of work, with land restoration and then the flooding problems that you have, which are common. What are some advice that you might give on how they can, foster these partnerships, work with other people? Maybe some lessons you learned that, although again, your case is pretty specific, that in other work that they could apply to what they're doing.
I think for me personally, my biggest takeaway, and the takeaway that any person that I meet and any person that I can convince to come to Dawes to take away, is the utilization of native plants within our landscapes. We've gotten into, as a society, a lot of cultivated plants and garden plants, and those definitely have their place, but we shouldn't ignore our native plants because of the purposes that they serve. From our aspect of bank stabilization and soil health regeneration. But then you also have the impact to pollinators, and we all know, with the monarchs population decline, that they need help too. So if we can plant native from, a wildlife's perspective as well as a functional perspective, we absolutely should. But then there's the added beauty to it. I think because we tend to see native plants in, say, like an unmowed field, that tends to make people think they look weedy, but I think there's ways to intentionally use them that can look really beautiful in a landscape. So one really cool thing that we've done at Rolling Hills is we did what's called swath seeding. So after the ground movement happened, after Stream and Wetlands actually put the berms in for the wetland, we Dawes came back in and put in these swath style seedings, which it was to take one specific species and plant that seed. So say it's butterfly weed, which is an orange blooming flower that monarchs absolutely love. And then beside that, we would plant, say, a whole patch of swamp milkweed, which blooms pink, another fan favorite of monarchs. So we basically made a garden out of native plants, but also fulfilling the functions that we needed from a wildlife perspective and from a stability perspective. So I think it's a really inspirational project from that sense of being able to use native plants, even in your backyard, they can look beautiful and they can still be functional. That was definitely my biggest takeaway.
All right, that sounds great. I'm sure that everyone, even at their homes, can look at some of these things. So about planting native, how did you go about determining what were native plants and how they would best affect what you're trying to do? Like, what was the research and the thought process of figuring out what is native to the area, and why you chose those? Some advice that other people in different areas can
Mhm.
follow up and do something similar.
Yeah, there's some really good resources of I guess one challenge when it comes to native plants is actually finding them and being able to purchase them for your own home. So for us, a partner that we use with frequency and have purchased our annual plants from is Ernst Conservation. They are a really great source for like Midwest seeds. Um, Luckily for Dawes, a lot of our seed we're actually able to collect in-house because we have I believe it's over 100 acres of prairies across the Arboretum. And so we basically will go through and collect seed from those, put them into a bulk storage system after we dry them and process them to fund our next restoration project. Um, and I know, again, knowing that it's difficult to find those connections and maybe not have 100 acres of prairie in your backyard, reaching out to organizations like Dawes, we're always willing to share a little bit of seed. Um, we're part of a program where we share seed with people from all over the country, going back to that genetic preserve. So reach out to local organizations and find ways that you can partner with them. I know we sell a lot of native plants. Ernst Seed is another great resource. Um, Prairie Moon Nursery is another one here in Ohio that's really good. So there's options in Ohio, but unfortunately, at this point in time, there isn't a high enough appetite for native seeds for you to be able to go to Lowe's and find them. But there are specific organizations that you can reach out to.
Okay, you had some nice partnerships and organizations that you did work with. Did you have an advantage of being kind of a known conservation area in making these partnerships, or did you have to still go out and try and find these partnerships yourselves as if you would be any other business?
It's funny. Yeah, it's funny you say that because the way that this project came about was very interesting. Stream and Wetlands Foundation, like I said, is out of Lancaster, Ohio, and we had tried to partner with them in the past, and it just hadn't worked out for one reason or another. So it was actually SER, Society of Ecological Restoration, came to Stream and Wetlands and said, we want to put in this really cool wetland complex. Do you know of any sites that might work out for this and within Licking County specifically? And so Stream and Wetlands then reached out to us, knowing that we have a lot of hydric soil at the Arboretum and that we might be a good place um, to partner and to complete this wetland construction. So yeah, there was actually a decent amount of legwork of finding this restoration project and being able to do it because I feel we're fairly well known within the Licking County and maybe the next couple counties over. But beyond that, I think we have a little bit more work to do of getting our name out in that instance.
Okay, well, so a small and remote organization, you'd partner with Microsoft as well. Can you tell me a little bit about what they did, which part of the organization that you were working with?
They essentially came to us or went to SER as a way to give back to the community of Licking County with the creation of a wetland. Specifically, they wanted a wetland that the community was able to be involved in. So with this project specifically, we had a lot of community engagement. We brought out volunteers, community volunteers, and local school groups to actually help us with the planting of it. So the entire purpose of this location-driven project was to get people to know and understand wetlands, to be able to get into a wetland and look at all the biodiversity within it and see why that wetlands are so important.
Okay, so community engagement is also another aspect that's very common, no matter the projects, whether they're large or small or anywhere in the world. So tell me a little bit about what you learned from community engagement, maybe some things that worked and didn't work, and people that can pass along your advice from your experience with community engagement.
From a community engagement standpoint, it was very well received from Dawes members as well as local community partners that we were installing a wetland. Obviously, we do have other wetlands on site, but in the same way that prairies are in decline and in an imperiled ecosystem, wetlands are in the same boat. We've lost over 90% of wetlands within Ohio as well. So being able to provide that niche, and we really got the birders excited. We're a pretty hot spot for eBird, which is a reporting structure used to report what birds are seen in an area. And when you install a new wetland, you bring in a lot of rare and special birds. So from the birding community, they were super excited when we rolled this out, as well as just our internal volunteers. They're always so excited to be able to participate in restoration projects with us. And truly, we would not be able to complete these restoration projects without our core of volunteers.
All right, thanks, Emma. So how far along is this project? Like, can you see the benefits already, or are you still kind of in the phase of where it's growing out and you kind of need some more time to find out the results?
Good question. And I'm excited to answer this actually. With Rolling Hills, one of the things that we learned was the importance of a seed bank. So if we would have taken, say, when we converted this in 2020, and we would have immediately put in the wetland, I feel like our results would have been a little different. But in 2020, instead, we put in this prairie and we let this prairie mature. We managed it to make sure we weren't getting invasive species. We weren't getting agricultural weeds. We managed it very meticulously to be a very high quality prairie. And that really, really set us up for success when it came to the wetland installation, because we already had a good base, right? We already had that baseline of good seeds in our foundation. So the wetland was dug and that was all done in about April. And I think that the area of impact was about 3 to 4 acres of the 14-acre plot as a whole. By mid-July, we already had probably 80% cover of vegetation, just because the seed bank was so ready once it was exposed to just shoot plants up. So at this point, it's pretty much done. We've got basically full vegetation over the site, full utilization by wildlife. We've already seen in the first year. So last year, we actually saw tadpoles in it the very first year that it was created, months after it happened. So the term "build it and they will come" absolutely rings true in this situation. We've had osprey, we've had blue heron, we've had green heron. The birds have moved in, the bees have moved in, and obviously, you know, the macroinvertebrates that are feeding the tadpoles and the frogs, they've all moved in. So it's crazy how quickly everything came together and how quickly it, you know, everything grew back in. So in just a measly 2 years, it's absolutely beautiful and fully vegetated.